live from the Think Radio Broadcast Center in Ottawa, Canada's capital. And I am here in the studio tonight with my co-host, Nick Vandergraat.
That's me.
And we are so happy that Nick is here. And joining us again tonight in the studio is our second co-host, or is it becoming our second co-host, Chris Fraser.
Our tri-host.
Yes. Great to be here.
Our co-host.
Call me whatever you want. Just call me.
Don't start that.
I like tri-host.
And you're probably wondering what's going on with our theme music tonight, ladies and gentlemen. Well, I have an explanation for that. I know you're probably thinking, okay, they've come up with new theme music. They're rebranding their show, but nothing as elaborate as that. By way of explanation, a computer crash and we lost our theme music. And I spent like half an hour going through our music library trying to find the theme music. And for the life of me, I couldn't do it. So we had to choose something else tonight. And we're going to hopefully have our regular music again next week. But if not, well, oh well, c'est la vie, right? Anyway.
C'est la vie, c'est la guerre.
C'est la vie, c'est la guerre. Okay, so what am I thinking here? Quick housekeeping, as usual, if you want to join into the conversation live, click on the comment or chat bubble in the live player, and you may have to register or log in one way or the other. That's just to ensure that you are a real flesh and blood human being and not a robot or malevolent algorithm. It took a while for us to work that into our show, but I think that's a regular, a malevolent algorithm. I think I'm back to our show a few weeks ago where we were talking about algorithms and the problems with them and stuff like that. So, a malevolent algorithm. Say that 5 times quick. Say it once quick.
I have trouble with my own name. Never mind a malevolent algorithm.
Malevolent, M-A-L.
Yeah, whatever.
Okay. All right, well, let's just jump right into it. We had a whole list of things that we wanted to talk about, and we'll get to them tonight, but I think that we have to, at the very beginning of the show, we don't have any choice except for, Nick's got to turn his phone off, which means I should turn my phone off too, actually.
Mine's off already.
Yeah, see, Chris is a pro, and he didn't even know it. What am I doing here? There we go.
Turning your phone off.
Rush Limbaugh. Big surprise. We all knew he was ill. We knew he was very ill. When he was diagnosed with lung cancer about 12 months ago, it was stage 3 or stage 4 already.
Yeah.
So
it wasn't really a big surprise.
Well, it was. I mean, there was no lead up to it as far as I recall here. He was on the air last week. I was listening to him, and he sounded as healthy as he ever has. Whether he was or wasn't, I don't, obviously he wasn't, but I didn't think that, his passing was this imminent. So it was a little bit of a surprise for me anyway.
Well, I have a feeling he didn't think it was all that imminent either.
But, Rush really carved out a path for conservatives on the radio, conservative talk radio. But that wasn't how he started, Nick. I know you were sort of spending some time researching his history, but, he dabbled in a lot of things before he actually got into radio and talk radio, I should say. He was involved with
he was a DJ.
Teams, and he was a DJ.
He was he first, when he was in high school is when he first started to notice radio. His love for radio took off back in 1969, and he began to try to find positions to get himself into radio. Now, he went to college or university, I forget which one it was now, because his parents wanted him to have something he could be successful at, and he failed at everything. There's a quote I read online about his mother saying he just flunked everything. It's as if he only cared about radio. Well, hello. You can't. One of the things I've learned as a parent is if your children have no interest in what it is you think they should be interested in, it doesn't matter how heavily you flog them, they're not going to be interested. They'll only be interested as long as you're watching. And the moment you change focus and go someplace else, they're going to quit. It's like trying to force a kid to learn piano who doesn't want to learn piano. They'll do the scales as long as you're watching, but the moment you leave the room, the piano quits.
That was me as a kid.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like, there were all kinds of things my parents wanted me to learn how to do, like schoolwork, like math, and I had no interest in. So I did just enough to get by. And that came back to haunt me later. I wish I had listened to my dad. But getting back to Rush, he went from there, and he bounced around a whole bunch of different radio jobs on both AM and FM. And usually there was a personality clash with someone at the station that got him fired. In some cases, he'd only last a couple of weeks. And then he was gone, okay? Or he might last a year, gone. And during that time, what will happen with someone who's going through that, they are either going to shrivel up and die and lose the dream and fall away and go off in a different direction. And that even happened to Rush a little bit. He went off to, he ended up in Kansas City, and somebody told him at a radio station, you're never going to make it as an on-air host. I suggest radio sales because you have the personality, but you just don't seem to be able to do it. Nobody was talking about talk radio. It was always music. And he didn't seem to be able to get his personality in sync with being a DJ for, like, a Wolfman Jack, if you remember him,
right,
from the 60s, was a huge talk show. He had a huge show built around rock and roll, Southern rock and roll. And a lot of people refer to him even in music. So anyway, he could never become that. So he went to work for the Kansas City Royals when he lived in he moved to Kansas City.
That's the baseball team.
That's the baseball team in Major League Baseball. And he developed a friend out of future Hall of Famer third baseman George Brett.
George
yes,
Brett,
George
yeah.
Brett.
George Brett, sure.
That's right.
Amazing.
And that friendship lasted.
They were a good team at that time.
Yeah, well, he
They were a very good
apparently
team.
did have some success because he was in group sales. So he went from a group salesman to managing the group, and obviously saw some success, developed this relationship, and then his career took another turn, and he ended up in Sacramento. And I remember the first time I ever heard Rush was back in the 90s. A friend of mine said, "Did you hear what Rush Limbaugh said today?" I said, "What's it?" Because I'd never heard anybody called Rush. I always thought it was a play in football.
Was that actually his name?
Yes.
Okay.
He tried a bunch of different monikers and finally got to the point he said, "Look, I am Rush Limbaugh. I'm going to stop faking this." He was on his name Rush was in honor of the maiden name of a grandparent, Edna Rush. So they named him Rush after her. Okay, that's where the name Rush, and his middle name H was Harold or Henry. I'd have to read it again.
Hudson, actually, it says here.
Hudson, okay, I knew it was an H. Anyway, so Rush Hudson Limbaugh III. Now, he never used the full title, but I do remember saying he was Rush Limbaugh III. And he told the story of him getting the job in Sacramento. And it's backed up by what I was reading tonight. And he said to the people in Sacramento, "Look, I'll come on and I'll do a public affairs talk show. But I don't want any direction from the station. I want complete freedom to do what I want the way I want." Because he'd been in radio long enough, on and off, over the years, that he knew what kind of show he was going to be good at and which ones just weren't going to work. So they slipped his leash and they let him go. And within 10 years, he was speaking to 20 million people. That was 1983, I believe it was the year he started out in Sacramento. And by the early 1990s, he had 650 radio stations in his broadcast network that syndicated his show. He also had 20 million people a week. He was one of the most well-informed people in radio, and he was also one of the most highly respected and listened to. I remember when Newt Gingrich was Speaker of the House,
I believe
he
so.
called Rush. Now, politicians don't normally call of their own volition. Sometimes they get invited onto a show, but they would just pick the phone up and call him because they knew what kind of influence he had. And in the class of 94, which is when the Republicans took control of both the Senate and the House, the Republicans made him an honorary lifelong Republican because of his influence in giving him that victory. And that was when they defeated Bill Clinton and Hillary and Al Gore. And that was
that was the off-year election that year.
Yeah.
And so Clinton was still the president, but that was the contract with America.
Oh, that's right.
That was the contract with America. And Bill Clinton, just to digress a little bit, one of the interesting things about Bill Clinton was, say what you will about him, but he was a very, very sharp, knowledgeable, experienced politician, and he could see the writing on the wall. And so he collaborated quite closely with Gingrich and with Congress at that time to do all kinds of things under the contract for America.
Right.
And in fact, he came up with the term triangulation, the whole idea of, okay, steal your opponent's main theme or main issues,
and
do something about it, and make it your own, right?
Yeah.
And he probably didn't do that entirely, but Bill Clinton, ironically, was a fairly conservative
by
president.
today's standards, yes.
Okay, by today's standards, for sure.
Today's standards,
Absolutely.
that's for sure.
But I remember I was driving tractor-trailer in the States at the time, and I got an education over 10 years that I drove listening to Rush. It really is the seed of where my own personal experience at talk radio germinated, because I would be listening to Rush and pounding on the steering wheel. Yeah, because finally somebody was saying out loud on a national platform the things that I believed in, okay? Mm-hmm. And it was so refreshing. And you get into a discussion, especially if you come home to Canada, with all this knowledge that Rush had given you. Now, a lot of people didn't like Rush, obviously. There were a lot of people who absolutely, abjectly hated the man. And when you're that popular, that's going to happen. Right? Nobody can make a friend out of everybody. There's just, that person just does not exist. So you had his supporters and you had his detractors. And I was a supporter of him for a bunch of reasons. He was saying what I believed in rallying around the flag and how you have to hold people accountable. And his moniker during that period was, what are they going to try and do to fool us today? And he would have a countdown every day that Bill Clinton was in office to the next election. We're at day 1,036, 1,035, 1,000, and every day he would do it, and he'd go after them, and he would use their own words against them. Mm-hmm. And it drove the White House crazy. And Newt Gingrich would come on the air, and in this one instance, he said, just keep doing what you're doing. You are having an impact you can't fully understand. So anyway, he was, without question, he laid the framework or paved the road or plowed the ground, whatever analogy you want to use, for what is now a very wide-ranging, conservative voiced industry, if I can use that phrase, for people like Ben Shapiro, for people like Hannity, for people like, what's that lawyer out of New York? I can't think of his name, but you'd know him.
Mark Levin.
Mark Levin, yes. And he also gave people a shot at hosting his show, like the Canadian
Mark Stein.
Mark Stein. Mark Stein would fill in for Rush. And I think Rush did it partly because Mark Stein's a brilliant man. But he's not exactly what you would call prime replace Rush material.
No.
He just doesn't have the personality.
Yeah, but he's fun to listen to, though, Mark Stein.
He is, but Rush was an act. As much as he was informative, he could be hilarious. He mastered the art of using parody music. Like he had a guy writing for him parody songs all the time.
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
absolutely.
As
a matter of fact, when I started my radio career back at CH.